Dispatch. Colleagues, let's settle down. I'm informed that the colleagues will be coming in now after the agreed time frame. Will come and give us a dance move here in front. Are you volunteering? All right. Colleagues, let's proceed with our program. But before we go to the next presentation, which will be on the lifestyle audit by the Special Investigative Unit, we are going to hand over to our Honorable Minister of Malawi to say 1 or 2 words because they are going to leave us. They will be leaving the session. Let's give her Batupile clap, colleagues. Well done, yay. So I believe, yes, I believe even back in our departments, we are going to practice this Batupile clap because I don't think all our colleagues know this Batupile clap. Over to you, Minister.
Thank you so much, moderator. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Let me recognize the presence of our colleagues from DPSA, the director and your team, but also our colleagues from UNODC, but also colleagues from UNDP Malawi, and all ethics officers from all over South Africa. It's really impressive for me to be here today to witness the Ethics Officers Forum, which to me, like I've said in the morning, is first of its kind to attend, but also it's something that as a team from Malawi we have learned that I believe that when we get back home, we are going to do that as well for our ethics officers. I know here you call them ethics officers. For us, we call them degradation officers. So it's something that we have learned. And when we go back home, definitely this is a lesson that we have learned. I believe that by the end of the 2 days that you are here, you should be able to share your experiences, but also looking at how you have been, implementing the law that is there, but also the procedures that have been there. You'll be able to come in with some recommendations that will also be helpful to DPSA and even to see and where they can revise or improve or change or something like that, which is really helpful. But let me also thank you so much because we have also learned how your system is kind of stronger than ours in terms of declarations. And I believe that with what we have learned with my director, Director General, who is here with me, we should be able to go and look back at our law and say where we can improve. I also believe that you have also also learned something from us. Like the Director General said, we have already started, declaring with our spouses, our immediate family members. So as a politician, like I said, we are leading by example, because if you go on the Audubon website, you see me there with all my immediate family members declaring what we have. I believe that that also be done here. I know in Malawi, here you are doing more on the public service, which is different to how we are doing it. Because if you go to here, I have been here for 3 days now. I wanted really to find out how politicians do their things, and if how they are held accountable, or how do you monitor that politicians are really implementing the the required law. I haven't been able to do that. But for us, if you go to Malawi, you'll find that Audubon is responsible for everyone, including the executive. And it's more transparent. That's why you're able to access what us as politicians have. While in Malawi, while here, I think in Malawi, it's the opposite. We have problems as politicians to know what these civil servants have. They hide it from us because their own politicians, they can say, can we see what you have? And, through my committee, which is a monitoring committee of Audubon, we also make sure that we do that so that we set an example. But we have learned how we are doing it as public servants. I believe when you go back, we are also going to be on the neck and say, can we see the public servants that haven't declared, so that we also invite them to our committee and, if possible, impose sanctions against them for non-compliance. But all in all, we have learned. I wish we were here full day, because we are also interested to know how you are doing your lifestyle auditing. In Malawi, that's a new thing. It's not there. So we would have loved to learn also how you're doing it. We are very much ready to have our lifestyles audited as members of parliament. I know in the morning there was a question to say 60%, 80, what, the majority said 10. Yes, of course, no one would want to have their lifestyles audited. But for the sake of the law and for the sake of progress and the sake of fighting against corruption, we are ready for that, and we are ready to learn on how you are doing. I believe you're going to share the presentation with us, so that when we go back, we make good use of it. Another thing we have learned from here finally is the issue of electronic declarations, which we don't do. For us in Malawi, we are using manual. So our officers, they go around reminding public servants to do the manual declarations, and then they take them to the office of the Director of Asset Declaration, which is not very effective. So we have learned how your system is. It's really workable. We are going to do that in Malawi, because currently we are in the process of doing a law review of our asset declaration, and that's why we said, let's go and learn from what other people are doing, so that when we are reviewing our law, we should have all these things incorporated: issues of electronic declarations, issues of lifestyle auditing, which are not there in our act. And I was even surprised when I was looking at, I think Paman, they said there's a 350 Rand gift declaration, which you have to make something like that. We don't have that. A gift is a gift. So So that's something that we have also learned. And I believe when we go back home, Director and our team will be able to do that. UNODC, thanks for your support. We are here because of UNODC and UNDP in Malawi. Thanks for the financial support, but technical support as well. When we go, we are not stopping here. We believe that we'll keep working with us so that we have a perfect law in place, but also developing the system. We believe that shortly DPSA will also come to Malawi and, help us to set up our electronic thing and whatever, which is really impressive. I'm really happy that we are here, and I'm really impressed that we have learned a lot. And I believe that someday we'll be able to, come here again and say, because of the tour that we had, this is the product, and we'll be able to have a corruption-free Malawi, but also a corruption-free Africa. On that one, let me stop there. I wish you all the best. God bless you. Thank you.
Thank you, colleagues. I believe there's a lady who lost something. So when we continue with our program, you can come and see me for me to validate and assess as to whether you are the rightful owner. Yes, I'm managing the risk. Now, on our agenda, colleagues, we are going to hand over to Mr. Tulane from the SIU to take us through the lifestyle audit. And the floor is yours, Ntat.
Good afternoon. Thank you. Don't be afraid. I know when you see SIU. Yesterday, we were doing the launch of the local government anti-corruption forum. The minister says, I didn't know that SIU can also sing, have a choir. I know they only chase us only. So don't be like that. We are free. We are like any other people. We are not after you unless you call us to come after you. So don't be afraid. So I'll be interacting with you colleagues. I think at the end we'll have some time for answers and the questions. So just be free. I know it's after lunch, but I'll try to keep you awake. If I see you sleeping, then I'll start with you for lifestyle audit. You'll be the volunteer automatically. When we finish here, I will tell you the results. Okay, colleagues, when in the morning, Chris was presenting from the ethics, he said 89% said yes, service audit. I believe this one should be, if it was categorized correctly, say it's senior management, what is their perspective, weekly management perspective, general, SCM and finance, we're going to get more proper results. At the moment, I'm telling you that from senior management is a big resistance, of which is the core, of which I think those surveys should be repeated. So to give those proper results. Okay, as I mentioned, my name is Tulane Mkungo from SIU. I'm a chief risk officer responsible for, I think, ethics under my department. The screening, we do the screening for our employees before they get in, and we do the screening as well when continuous screening. This means our lifestyle audit SIU is a norm. We screen you after some certain years, so that you are still good, what you have positions. So as we do our asset declaration, we also confirm with the screening as well. Also risk management under my department. And then also, what is it? Also, as I did mention, the ethics was the first one. Okay, so colleagues, in terms of what we have done, when the TPSA issued the circular to start the lifestyle audits, then there were in the Manasa department, it came to us that we want to start immediately now. Then because we've been there in the game for the long time, then we're in a proposition to start assisting them. So we have start with the first one that we have done, but for now, I'll show you the procedure that we have worked on. What is the procedure, what we have followed, how we do the lifestyle audits. I believe you as ethics officers, then I was going to be your task, of which I'm not sure whether you will be ready as well, but we'll talk about that maybe towards the end. Okay, in the scope, I'll turn to introduction documents that we require, the process, red flags, critical success factors, and then we go for the questions. Okay, I didn't mention the first paragraph, one go, that was the background, where it's coming from, and pass. Then we said lifestyle audits can be tailor-made to meet each department or entity requirements on how they want to pitch it at which level. The process is based on as I mentioned earlier on, our pre-employment screening procedure that we had already, it was developed, that we used for screening and vetting of our employees, which is about lifestyle audits before we get to you in our organization. So screening process was developed. Yeah, this one is fine. Okay, developed to complete and short time period is 25 working days when we screen a person before it gets employment at SIU. It focuses on the integrity of that person. Before we get you, we want to see your integrity in terms of what you have disclosed to us. Is it true and reflects of you who you are? If you are not, then we decline you. Yes, reflect. Okay, that's it. Okay, what document that we require? First, we have the integrity screening form, which needs to be commissioned by that person who is submitting it, which include asset declaration. Then the CV, the certified copies of the documents, which is identity document, spouse as well, birth certificates for you and your children's, education, academic qualifications, including metric, senior certificates, or diplomas, degrees, all what you said you have in your CV. Membership certificates, e.g., you're admitted attorney, you're a member of EMSA, you're a member of Ethics South Africa, you're a member of IIA, all that. Driver's license, passport with endorsements, deeds of trust. Those are all the documents that we require, which must accompany the completed form, which is now being commissioned. The statements from the past 3 or 6 months in respect of all bank accounts, credit card, and other certificates, vehicle finance accounts, investments, cryptocurrency accounts, which is new. It was not there before. Personal loans, statements of past of 1 month respect of hire purchase agreement, mortgage bond account, general accounts, clothing, etc. that you may have, administration orders, debt review, distribution account, all that must be accompanied, which must be the documents that we require when you do the lifestyle audit. Okay. Latest salary, payslip, completed, signed consent form, criminal record check that we do, completed and signed consent form for academic record and membership check, fingerprints electronically, we use AFIS system or manual taken if negative, or name and ID check. Extensive process now. What we do after we received all these documents now, that is now starting the process, the analysis of all these documents and correspondences. Review the integrity form to identify now all the red flags compared to your CV. Because first we said, remember, we want your CV. Even for lifestyle audit, we want your CV. Because we want to get true integrity of you. For instance, maybe we have 20 years not applying. Once is a lifestyle audit, it means you must develop the CV. You see, because now the CV must match what you said you have as well, because it must determine your integrity and your lifestyle. Some people have been in government for over 30 years in the same position, doing corruption, not applying because they are scared to move. To move. When I move here, they will uncover what I've done. So I must sit here, I don't apply. I'm fine. I'm fine as a finance administrator or a senior manager, what. I'm not going to apply anything because when I move here, what's going to happen? So we are sitting there and we are relaxed. Now, this process is going to uncirculate a lot of the people and also the employees. So if an ethics officer, then you are tasked to do it. It means first of all, you must check with your manager, your seniors, if they will protect you as well. This means your life as well may be in danger as well, because now we're going to uncirculate people from the comfort zone, because we're going to take more out of what they are doing out of work and also at work. Reference check, we require 2 socially and 1 for work. It means now all this must be in your CV or in the form that we have given you to complete. Then we verify the qualifications and membership with MIE, credit check with TransUnion, business membership, directorship, we verify, property ownership, we verify, judgments and defaults, we verify and check all that. Then we go to notice. And we have submitted asset disclosure. You have also submitted the form. So now at Natis, we're looking now, how many cars do you own? Which cars? Then maybe in your CV or in your form, you disclose 1 car or 2 while you have 5. Now this is where is get you verified driver's license, vehicle ownership. Those we verify and get from there. Criminal record check, we check it. Then we also do what called as layered voice analysis, which is similar to lie detector test. Remember, you gave us also your CV, you gave us your integrity form that you have completed, the documents. Now this must mesh. Then we set you an hour or more. If we have long CV, this can take 2 hours. Or we have a lot of assets just under your name. But maximum usually is a 1 hour. We ask you to be in a quiet place, in your office. If you don't have office, ask someone to give you office in your area of work where you're gonna sit quietly. Then we give you the call. We are not sitting with you. And when we're in our office, we are in your office at the PSA. We call you, pleasure, we are setting a time with you. Please, at 1 o'clock on Tuesday, we'll be interview with you. Then we first, now once you have checked your CV, we check everything. First, we ask, how many vehicles you own? You say 2. Okay? We have went to Natis, we have four vehicles. The other 2, why are you not closing? No, that one I bought it for my wife, but it's under your name. Okay, it's under my name. How was it financed? I check vehicle asset finance. No, it's paid up in cash. They start, You see, all those things are part of the lowered voice analysis. Now you need to speak, then we will verify the truth that we have said, that you have all this, we're verifying all this. We have qualification, you have a master's. We have also verified with MIE, master's does not exist. Then we call you, how many questions we have? I have honors. We have, so we have the master's. Then we start backtracking. Then all this is recorded at the back because it's a lowered voice analysis to give the full report. So that's just a snapshot of what it also does that can help you as well. Then we do the follow-up on those what you pick up from the lowered voice analysis compared with the information that we have, whereas to investigate further now to dig more about the lifestyle audit of a person, report and rate the recommendations, then quality assure the report, then issue certificate of compliance or non-compliance for each person. There is a detailed report for each person when we do the lifestyle audit. I will share with that at the end. I will show you how the report looks like. Then when we do the financial analysis, also, we look at the directorship, ownership of business registered at the Companies and Intellectual Property Commission, registration of identity business of Central Supply Database, we check there, payments made to identified business via bus systems, ownership of motor vehicles, I've dealt with that, ownership of properties via Windid, we check, identity numbers, accept all that, salary details, we pass that, latest annual financial disclosure that you have submitted, applications to grants of like SSA, people that are working also apply for grants, they receive it, we also pick up. Then we compare this in information against information selected from the received in all of these accounts, perform income versus expenditure. We look, you are a director, you are earning so much, your expenses are this so much, you are paying how much you left with, are you copying or not? If we are copying, but it seems that your salary is low, how do you cope? You must answer all those questions on how are you financing the rest of your debt. Vehicle ownership was likely paid in cash or shorter period. We look at that in detail. You purchased a car in December 2021. Now in September, it's paid up. That is also show at Natis if it's paid up or not, and not the system, then you must account and say, where's the finance of that vehicle of 1.2 million? How did you finance it within shorter period? Because now it's a red flag. that we must put the full report on how that was done. Property ownership also as well, we look the same thing. Yes, it's have a bond. If it doesn't have a bond, was paid in cash, how the finance was obtained. If it was a 3 million house, how the 3 million was obtained. You are a deputy director earning blah, 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 but you're able to finance it cash. All that must be in the report because now it's a red flag as well. Verify all red flags questioned through email, affidavit, and lowered voice analysis. As I mentioned earlier, what is a voice analysis does. Okay, these types of red flags that are also coming up. We also identify this criminal record. Some employees who have been in the government for 30 years, you don't disclose that you were on leave for 2 weeks, that you are said you are special, you are in a special leave, something for family, but you were arrested and you appear in court and you were sentenced. You paid a guilty fine of 5,000 rand with a suspended sentence of 2 years. Is not there at employer's record. That's also we pick up and put back in the report that we are sitting there with a criminal that did not disclose. Now the leave that you took, you must also account because you lied as well. So remember, this is lifestyle audit, colleagues. Okay, we are going to unsettle a lot of people in the comfort zone. So it is one of the difficult jobs that is also new. Forged false academic records, that is one of the things that are also lots picking up. As I mentioned earlier on, we have light about qualifications, you got a job, you are settled now, you are performing, yes. Well performing, you are a star. But you don't have the qualifications that you were required for the job. You lied about them. There's the difference between the employer make, what is it called, is an exemption. Which you have been here for 20 years. We promote you although you don't have qualifications. That's separate. But if you lie about qualifications, then you get a job. Then it's a crime now. This also is that we pick up on the lifestyle audit. As we are there now, we are earning how much salary of direct? I don't know. Don't disclose. Don't disclose. I'm joking. We are earning it now. Then this is now, but you don't have the qualification that you lied about. And your employer went to do the verification because we have the connection. They lied about the report as well. That MIE confirm your qualifications. But from within now in an independent lifestyle audit, that's where it's picked up that even the employer call you that with you, your HR, to give you the correct results of the qualifications. False stated professional membership is also a norm. I want a job. I see now they advertise a job. They want to be a member of an EMSA or IIA or ethics. You just put it in your CV, you submit, and you never join. And after you got a job as well, you don't join. Some others as well, they join after they got a job to cover themselves. At least others, they never join after, even if they get a job, as they lie that they are members of the certain institutions for professional. Severe unrealistic social expectations, living above the means, that is the norm to pick up there. And then you need to double check as well how the person is financing his or her lifestyle. Severe financial difficulties with no self-intervention, each debt review, that one we see as a positive because a person is willing to rectify the situation. So it's not a negative one. Evidence of pattern of financial irresponsibility, which can include like gambling, all that, we pick it up in your bank statement. Because now for this process, remember I said we watch all your bank statements. So the gambling also shows there's some gamble close to the salary. Find out a person is earning 30,000, is gambling with 15,000, half is going to gambling. So that's also lead to crime because now you need to cover the gap. You always I want to put more, but the gap you never cover. The gambling is one of the scams that is making people broke and commit crime mostly. Substance addiction from gambling ascent, poor disciplinary record, serious multiple incidents. We also find all this prior history of violent conduct. We pick up repeated dispute with colleagues, supervisors, racism, sexism, emotional, verbal abuse. Most of these other things we pick up during the lowered voice analysis as well, and with the reference check, what we do with your social, also with your employer reference. Then leave pattern. Also, leave pattern is one of the reflex that you must pick up when you are doing the lifestyle audit. We are not going to leave at any time. You make sure that you go and live on December with everyone, because you don't want to see what you are doing in your records. You want to be in a position full time throughout the year. Those are also the red flags. Dishonesty, which deliberately providing false or misleading information. I mentioned earlier on that one. Deliberate omission of information, which also a serious offense. Like non-disclosure of material information is viewed at a serious light. Lessons learned, where we did the one that we have done already in the lifestyle audits that we are busy with other departments, is that the 3 months is very short. So it's better that we look up to 6 or 12 months when we're looking the bank statement for lifestyle audits. Because 3 months, as it was announced, the lifestyle audits, most people that are doing corrupting the accounts, they've stopped using the accounts. The money is just sitting there. If you look for 3 months, you won't see back how the money came from, because they're looking for only 3 months. So suggestion is to go back as 6 to 12 months so that you can proper check of the bank accounts, where was the money deposited coming from, who deposited that money in those accounts. Cooperation is a crucial, as we cannot subpoena bank statements. This is one of the other problems that we have, because although lifestyle audit is compulsory as issued, but people, they still refuse with their bank records. So if it can be maybe the law, or I don't know how can be done, that is compulsory to be subpoenaed through the bank, that will assist you as well once you're doing to your departments. But you will find that you don't get the bank statements, because people, some others, is a fear of maybe the ethics officer, maybe the director or chief director or DD. Then they say that I can't give my records to a junior. Now we must verify the records of a DG or TTG. He said, who is he or she to go through my personal documents? Those are the issues that you are going to come up with. So if it has been within your department by you, we are going to still face those troubles in getting documents from your people that you are working with, or colleagues, even colleagues at a peer level. They will still refuse, which you are going to know exactly what I'm owning, what I have, how I look like, my financials. Those are the problems. Suggestion that we have at the moment, if DPSA can work with FIC as well, if they're able to also work when you're doing your lifestyle audit, they're able, when you pick up red flags, to assist you immediately and trace those funds. Because at the moment, it's a long process. You ended up finish the audits without getting anything from FIC, because they said they are not allowed to give to any other people the financial records of employees. Consequence management, which is a non-cooperation as well. Now we have done your lifestyle audit. Is it being implemented? No. If it be shelved, that cooperation as well. Is it really be done for the purpose to correct, or just a tick box that we have done it? Then that cooperation for disciplinary action is also needed. Critical success factors that we have, the consent part form, integrated form is working. Commission documents is key, also working good, because now you have commissioned, you're sitting under audit. Trusted skill capacity that we, for us that we use externally and internally, working with also these ones. Review directive, instruction, absence, contracts, all this, buy-in from top management, from participant, all this, I mentioned the FIC one that we need to improve on the FIC. Then how to get to SIU for us, from SIU. As being issued that this is compulsory now, is either department decide, you do yourself, or you get the consultant to assist you if you're scared to do it yourself within your department. Also, you can get to SIU, we can come to an agreement to assist you and do it as independent, or you go out for tender, you get the consultants. It's up to you. I believe they're going to also show it you. It's not compulsory to go anywhere at the moment. It's up to you on how you want to start this lifestyle audit. Who can do it for you? Okay, and that is us the process. Decide on which. For us for now, what you do, your HOD or your DG writes a request to our head of the unit that you want the secondments people to come and conduct the lifestyle audit. Then we get to an agreement. Then we sign off that agreement. Then we come and assist you if you want to be assisted by us. But if you don't as well, is not the mandatory. For that, this is our hotline, as you know. Then I want to show quickly with you before we answer any question, the report, how the reports look like. Okay, or this one now still go down. Okay, so I removed all the names here, so there is no name of a person that you can pick up there if you try to zoom closer. You won't see any name of the person that is being mentioned there. It is one of the how does the report look like? And so you can go down. That's where we verification status information. We want all that. You are South African, your ID, South Africa, your address, your phone numbers, telephone, date of birth, married, you are not married, by who, your spouse. We look all that, which is part of the form as well. But this is the report now. You can go down. Verification statutory, now we start the verification details, previous marriages, driver's license, we looked at, and the endorsements of driver's license, we look, we go criminal record, and there you like to see that one. We're saying that we have on the 10th of May 2022, a check was performed at the South African Police Services Criminal Record Center, and no criminal record was linked to this employee full names and identity number. But if it was something, we put detail there. What was found from the Criminal Record Center. Okay, verification, qualifications. We look this one as mentioned earlier in the presentation. Those are the high school, university. Then MIE confirmed is yes. Is their qualification valid? All that you can go. Professional membership as well. We also verify which one we have, which institution is valid, yes or no, all that. Then we look at that, go down on the travel, your passports. We want both the personal and also the one for official passports. We look at them, the validity and dates expire and issued. You can go. Then we look at the financial now, at the companies that you own. How many companies you have, shares, where? You look all that, you can go. Loan accounts, how many loans we have, any other financials. Look at any other financial income generating assets that you have. Yeah, we look at the trust. Look at disclosure and partnership. If you're passionate with any company, ownership, primitive work that you have already disclosed with your employer as well, check it, it's valid. Again, consultation work, go. Sponsorship, gift and hospitality. Then we go to immovable property that you have, your house, your bond. Then we get to the vehicles. Looking at the vehicles that a person have, owning, how much is still outstanding, how much was financed with, if not financed, is it paid up? Ownership of business, Then we go down to the salary per month, how much a person earning per month. We put it there. Compared so that we can compare now with the expenditure and the thing that you are owning. Property ownership, you see there, then we put details of the property you own, you can move. Like this one, we look at also the vehicles. If you select one, this one I put it this one for a purpose. You see this one, it said the car was purchased in 4th of July of January 2021, which was 630,000 over the period of 60 months. The current outstanding amount is 288,000. As of the 1st of May 2022, with a monthly payment of 2,151. If you multiply that 2,151 times those months, 16 months, it won't give you that 288, which is the outstanding amount. Then we want to dig further now as an investigator, lifestyle audit. How was the deposit paid in this car? How much was it? Because now it must match this gap to say that if it was financed with 200,000, then now it's also the red flag. How a person with that earning the salary gets 200,000 cash with these expenses to pay that deposit. You must go further now and check how was the money obtained, all that. Okay, we can go. Look at like this one that I'm showing here. He has 15 bank accounts. You say 15 bank accounts. How and I'd find out as well what these bank accounts for. How much sitting there? You see other accounts, go down, go. You can see the red flags. You see other account, the other account is sitting 182,000. Go up, down again. There's another one which is a red flag sitting with 423,000. Go down. It's sitting with 116,000. All this that you need to go further now, as 3 months won't be enough to get all this information, how this money went to these bank accounts and why a person have 15 bank accounts, all have money on these bank accounts to identify this lifestyle audit. You can go down. I think I'm almost done. Yeah, this is a full also detailed, active, not active, criminal financial analysis. Go down. Okay, the reference check that we done people also disclosed there. Lowered voice analysis results, we also put them there. Then we do the final findings at the end. You can close there. Close there, we'll see other things, please. Don't move. It's done. Okay, thank you, colleagues. That is how we conduct lifestyle audits. I think I didn't exceed the hour, still within 30 minutes. 30 minutes. But not many questions. No?
Okay, thank you for the presentation. Colleagues, can we give him a Batupilot lab?
Huh?
Thank you, colleagues. There's only one person. I think that person is forgetting along the way, but before that person leaves here, they will be knowing Batupilot lab. Let's take their hands for questions or comments. Noted. Noted. I'm only taking these hands. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Those are the only questions that I'm taking.
Thanks to me. I just want to demystify something. Thulan is only pulling your legs when he says you're going to do this work. The reason why he's doing this presentation is so that you see the work behind the lifestyle audit process. And when we say you have a part in the process, you are not expected to do the whole thing. Thulan, I don't want them to all go and resign after this. This hall is full. I won't get them back. Thanks.
Yeah, it's a pleasure.
Thank you, it's his pleasure. We'll take the questions.
Hi, Thulan. I have a bit of a concern. I just need to check how SIU will navigate its way around the following two issues. You said there should be a law, and I'm sure DPSA should facilitate that to make it compulsory for the submission of bank statements. So my question is, if a person refuses to provide the bank statement, it could be, there could be something incriminating in those statements or any other document for that matter. And the Constitution provides everyone, sorry, everyone with a right not to provide self-incriminating evidence. So what we have, that law, if we have a law that is contravening a provision of the Constitution, I don't think it will see the light of day. I'm not sure, maybe you can clarify us on that. Similarly, with regard to the suggestion that the Financial Information Center should provide records, financial records of individuals. Would this not be a contravention now of the Protection of Personal Information Act? Or how are we going to deal with that? Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Let's take another questions, colleagues.
Thank you, Program Director. My question is also on that legislation part to say the lifestyle audit maybe need to be legislated, but I tend to agree with the previous speaker in regard to the rights of the people. I think we already have some challenges when it comes to requesting information from FIC so far when it comes to that. But then I'm checking with the presenter to say, when it comes to that, when you don't receive any joy from FIC, how do you deal with that? Do you close the matter, or how do you deal with that part? I had another one, presenter. So the lifestyle audit, I see you doing an extensive lifestyle audit, whereby I've already identified that it's not only gonna be ethics officers, like Auspressa has just said. It's a combination of other stakeholders within departments. What I'm trying to say is the 30 days that you are referring to, is it for the pre-employment part or the ones that are existing already, the employees already in the department? I think I covered what I needed to ask. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I noted. Was it not two hands? Now they are three. Oh,
Then maybe the secretary first.
okay, you can go.
Thank you, Tulani, for that presentation. Tulani, I think in regards to what you've given us a perspective on what the SIU is doing, and I think thanks for offering the service for free. Let's start there. You touched on the issue in regards to what is being taking place, and you mentioned, look, 25 days, 30 days as regards to this. Now, you started your presentation talking about the fact that the SIU, when you're employing people, you're doing this process. So obviously it's voluntary as regards to them giving you bank statements for the 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, 12 months as regards to processes. Is there anything that is being done regarding credit checks? Is it something that's being requested also as part of the process? Is the unit also looking at engaging the receiver as regards to what is being done? And when you talk of the new employees, and maybe DPSA can take a cue on this one to say that if we're looking at employing people, let's say at the SMS level, that it becomes mandatory that prior to employment, there is a lifestyle audit or review done on that, but it's something that one can think about. But I think looking at your other employees that is there, remember, we want to do this process in regards to a risk-based approach, which means there needs to be information that needs to be reviewed prior to getting this kind of effort, because then one needs to have a policy around the fact of how do you identify your officials so that you're not being subjective or being biased in any way to say, I don't like this person, so therefore I'm now going to do this. Because if you look at the voluminous of information that is there, it's quite rigorous as regards to what is being looked at. But once again, I think thank you for your presentation and the free service that you wanted to offer. Thank you.
Okay, can I answer this three first, Koituma? If possible. Of them, okay. Oh, okay. All right.
Chair, yeah, my name is Frank Low. I just want to ask just two questions maybe. Since the POPI Act, its intention is to safeguard the sensitivity and the private information of a person. In that case, with what you are doing, are you not violating a person's rights in that case? And then secondly, do you do awareness creation also so that you inform your officials that you're going to do this, or that they know, so that in case one of them finds himself in a position where I've been in the department in the SIU for 15 years, and now all of a sudden you're going to do a lifestyle audit on me, and I know my books doesn't look that good, so that I can resign beforehand instead of facing the embarrassment.
Thank you, Tulani. I wanted to ask three questions, but two have been asked by the latter speaker and the gentleman that side. But I'll only ask one. Yeah, there's Ntato Molu just went out now. Earlier on, he said we should be agents for change. And we have advisory capacity as well to provide. Now, my question is, Tulani, you said people, they go to work and then they take leave until they go to court and they get charged. And this person, when they applied before, there were no illicit activities that were identified. Later in years, they have these criminal records. What is our responsibility? Are these people that are supposed to come back and disclose that they have been charged recently and we have record? As an officer, how do I advise this person? Thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon, colleagues.
Yeah.
I just wanted to ask a question around the secondments. That how are you doing it? Are you doing it on a case by case, or you will have that person with the department for maybe some time that you will agree between the heads of department? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Let's start with the last one, the secondment. The secondment, first we agree in terms of which level, but usually we propose that it should be pitched from senior management first. That is a start. If there is a DG, start from DG, and all senior management. If it's from HOD, start from HOD with all senior management. Then we agree if there are 60 senior managers, then we determine how long we will take and how many resources can we second to do the work determined by the number of people that are going to be doing lifestyle audit. So it's preferred that it is done in the lump sum at once. If all senior managers they all go at once, all senior managers. Then mid management, they go at once, determine the number of them, they all go at once. That determines the period, a number of resources to be seconded. That's the first part. And then when I go back to the first question, is about also it's linked to the other one that was about the FIC. In terms of this one, first FIC, when they get the request, the act does not allow them to provide their financial records if there is no criminal case linked with that person. First, once we send back the report to the department that you did not precipitate, you refused, then there's a red flag. Then the department will now start the full investigation for that person only. Once they uncovered that truth, then they can start open the case. Then they can get that documents can be obtained. All of those documents that the person have not precipitated to submit. Also with the POPI Act, it does not clash with the POPI Act because this is the lifestyle audit is mandatory. So I think that pleasure can assist me with that question as well. As well. But in terms of what we have done with the current departments that we're working on, yes, it is compulsory. I think one of them we also brought their internal legal department to look at the POP Act. Then they said there's no contravention because it's the requirement of the employer to conduct a lifestyle audit. But still, they did not precipitate, they did not submit the records. So the department is busy now with the findings, also to disciplinary actions and the full investigations on those ones that they did not submit their documents as well. Right of people, do you? So the question also said, do we close the report if we don't get the records from bank and also from FIC? Yes, we close the report with recommendations to go further as detailed investigation on that personnel or person. So now there will be investigation start for you. Now, Boitumelo is being investigated because she did not participate in the lifestyle audit. So now is this investigation just for that person to dig all the information that he did not want to provide. That is how it is done. 25 to 30 days, that is for I was referring to our internal process when we do the screening for our employees, which we want to employ at SIU. We do it within 25 to 30 days. That is for our internal profile. For lifestyle audits, there's no period. We're just doing, it's depending on the flow of information for the lifestyle audit, how information we are getting. But this one, because it's for our internal, we do for our internal employees, there is a date that is linked to the KPIs that we're working on. That was just that. Should they report if the employee should report when they get charged and they were fined or they were jailed and also sentenced? Yes, you must disclose to your ethics officer, must be the record of that with your employer. The PSA before employee, yeah, how do you find that? There's a question that I didn't get, I think was the third one. I was trying to listen, but I didn't get, I think was the third. The gentleman there. There's a question that I didn't get. The first question that you asked, I was trying to follow up.
I think Pleasure noted that question, so she will be able to assist with the response.
Throwing you in the.
Thank you. Firstly, thank you very much, Tulani. I appreciate your time and sharing with us the information. I'm not going to try to respond to question by question. I'm just going to make general comments, especially relating to issues around POPIA and request of information from FIC and the like. So I'm going to respond in this way. I think maybe colleagues are overwhelmed because of the information, which is understandable, and you see yourself in that process. Now, this is where the regulation I was talking about this afternoon, just before lunch, is important. Remember the issue of referral. You have different organs of states with different mandates. So you will end where your mandate ends. So me and you do not have powers to go to FIC and request the records. Now, Tsapo made an important point to say, I might refuse with my bank statements because there's incriminating information. So when the person refuses with information, it raises suspicion. And what did we say? When there's suspicion for wrongdoing, you refer to law enforcement officers. The police has a different mandate and responsibility to what you have. And they will not encounter the same hurdles that you'd encounter because you don't have the mandate they have. So refer to the police. There's a specialized unit in the police that deals with these issues. So that is why we need to be clear about the process. This is where I fit in as an ethics officer. This is where I hand over to somebody else. So let's just be clear around that. So then you won't have these problems around POPIA or whether you can subpoena a bank statement or not. Somebody else has that responsibility and we must rely on that mandate. So, and the issue around criminal record, I also want to comment on it. I know somebody asked me the other time, we're talking about the same thing. What would an employer do with my case if I was found guilty of murder and it has nothing to do with my job? When you were employed, we did pre-employment screening, which included criminal record checking. According to us, you are not a criminal. If you become a criminal in the process, you have an obligation and responsibility to inform your employer. They will make that judgment, whether it affects your work and standing and position in the department or not. It's not for you to decide that. Somebody else has the responsibility and authority to make that decision. Thank you, colleagues.
Thank you, pleasure, and thank you so much, Tulani. Can we give Tulani Batubile clap, colleagues? I found that person. But I'm not going to expose that person. Now, the next presentation, colleagues, is the conflict of interest guide, which is going to be presented by Charles. He is going to present virtually. So when the kids are making
Charles, it's your time now.
Okay, hello colleagues, can you hear me? Okay, perfect. Great, thank you everyone. I'm glad to be here with you. I'm Charles Belumeur-Roberge. I'm the expert in ethics and integrity from the Canadian delegation, assisting TAO in terms of many matters related to ethics and integrity. So yes, I'm glad I had the chance to join you remotely. I'd love to be present on site. It's always better for such presentations, especially in terms of conflicts of interest matters, since it's so related to the context and the situations. But we'll do with it today. So we'll take about 50 minutes together to run through my presentation. So just to be sure, is it okay? Can you see the screen at the moment? Can you see the PowerPoint? Okay, perfect. So to start, I wanted to present quickly the Strengthening Ethics and Integrity Project, which is the name of the project we have, assisting TAO in many matters, as I just said. So the purpose of this project is to provide technical assistance to DPSA to design, but especially pilot the implementation of the TAO unit. So the project started in 2018 and it will be finishing in 2025. And the donor is Global Affairs Canada. So just to be a bit more precise about the aspect we're covering with the assistance we're doing. So the objective is to have an increased accountability, efficiency, and transparency of the public administration in delivering gender responsive services to the South African public. So we have three specific path. The first one being strengthened oversight and management of ethics, integrity, and discipline management matters. We also cover, we want to have an improved performance of the DPSA to be able to provide strategic advice and technical assistance to government departments regarding AEDM. Another objective is the improved professional conduct, including related to sexual harassment and sextortion in the public administration. So yes, we're covering many topics regarding ethics and integrity. One of them being conflicts of interest, which I'm mostly involved in, working with assisting Pleasures Directorate. So as it was mentioned, I assist working on the development of a conflict of interest prevention and management guide. So this guide is a tool which was developed, yes, to assist ethic officer in better understanding and better managing conflicts of interest, but also for all public service employees to be able to consult this guide and have a clear example, clear references to be able to see how a conflict of interest can take shape, in what work context can we see some risks of conflict of interest to prevent and manage. So if we run through today's objectives, first, we want to better understand the relevance of the guide and especially its application. So you're supposed to have received this guide before this presentation. So I hope you had the chance to run through it quickly, but we'll do so by looking at the table of contents to begin with together. Afterwards, we want to go over important concepts in conflict of interest prevention and management. So we want to make sure we develop together your ability to recognize conflicts of interest issues in practical situations. So we'll look at the conflict of interest definitions, the types of conflict of interest as well, and we'll run through some quick examples to see how we can try to identify some conflicts of interest in practical context. And finally, we want to address risks of conflict of interest that are more specific to the public service. So we want to look at specific sectors of activity and have a broader view maybe of the management competencies one could develop to address risks of conflict of interest. So before we look at the table of content of the guide, just quickly, I wanted to look at a section of the Public Service Regulation 2016, and which is surprisingly not the conflict of interest section, section 21, which is more related to the SMS members, but more broadly, the ethical conduct section and the duties of an employee. So we see that some of those points are not specifically related to conflict of interest prevention and management, but they are still really relevant and related to preventing conflict of interest and addressing conflict of interest issues. For example, when we talk about any official action or decision-making process which may result in improper gains. So knowing that an employee need to recuse herself or himself from such a situation, we'll see that this is surely related to conflict of interest prevention. And it is also the same thing with the second point, the obligation to immediately report to relevant authorities fraud and corruption. We'll see together that corruption is the broader box in which a conflict of interest can be presented. When we also think more in a practical way about refraining from favoring relative and friends, we'll see that this can be also a type of conflict of interest related to a type of conflict of interest. It is the same thing with the point G, the idea to not use or disclose any official information for personal gain or for the gain of others. So I just wanted to look quickly at those points that are presented in the ethical conduct, but we'll come back to those surely, and we'll see together the link we can make with the conflict of interest we try to define together. So before jumping into trying to define conflict of interest together, let's take a look at the table of content of the guide that was developed. So first off, there's the guide statement, the more formal guide statement. We present the objective of the guide. We present the application, so to whom it applies. We run through the duty and obligation of the public service employees. We also discuss on a more value side, the question of the accountability, so the professional accountability, but also more in terms of values, what is the place of the accountability in managing and preventing conflicts of interest. We make a link in point 6 with the Bateau-Pili, so the important values that are listed in Bateau-Pili. We also talk in 7 present in 7, the constitutional values. In 8, we clarify some of the key definitions that are presented everywhere in the guide. In point 9, we define what is a conflict of interest. We wanted to put it in a really simple way, so we made sure we had clear, important theoretical references to develop our conflict of interest definition, but we wanted it to be easy to use, easy to understand, and surely easy to apply. So in that section, we also present the difference in the 3 types of conflict of interest, something that we'll run through together today. In 10, we discuss about the prevention of conflicts of interest in work teams. And in 11, which is the most important category, it is the categories of risk of conflict of interest. So I'll assume that you run through this section of the guide, all the sections of the guide while talking to you today. So I hope you had the time to do so. But just to go through it quickly, the section 11 is really important because we decided to present a risk of conflict of interest sections. So our thought process was to define specific case scenario, specific sectors of activity in which it is most likely that risk of conflict of interest can arise. What we'll see together today is that conflict of interest can arise in a lot of contexts, and we can surely not list them all. So the objective with that approach was to give examples and just relatable cases for public service employees to see, for example, for them to ask them, with the situation I am facing at the moment, is there, while looking at the guide, a situation that looks like or has similarities with the situation I am facing at the moment? And in that specific context, should I be preventing some risks of conflict of interest? So that's really the approach we had, to give more example, a lot of context to the example, to show in what situation a conflict of interest can happen. So we have some risk of conflict of interest presented in human resources. We also have some in the procurement sector, in the grant sector, also in the representation sector, which is the more classic perception of what is a conflict of interest, which is more specifically related to gifts and any forms of benefits. We also have in 11.5 conflicts of interest related to assets of governments, and many others. So that's how we decided to structure the guide. And maybe to give you a bit of context, we also did some consultations to be able to have really relevant practical examples and scenarios to include in the guide. So we had a specific advisory committee which gave a lot of advices to adapt and revise the guide. We also did some consultation in the national and provincial sector. Okay, and finally, after the section 11, in the guide, we also have the tools section, which is still being adapted at the moment and finalized. But we have 3 important tools. We'll look at the first one together today. So the decision support tool, which is one of the most relevant tools, which can really assist the public service employees when facing a conflict of interest. We also have some reference document, important reference document. What is state capture? Always by keeping, an ethical point of view, defining state capture. Also presenting the distinction between rule-based ethic and value-based ethics. So quickly, this is how we structure the guide. So if we jump to what we'll look at today together, I found it important to try and define conflict of interest. At first, it might seem really simple to do, but conflict of interest, even with a lot of experience, is always a really tricky matter to deal with because it's so contextual. So we'll first start from corruption, trying to see how it derives from corruption and how what is the link to be made with corruption and other types of corruption as well. We'll also address a more theoretical definition and finally go to a more applied definition to the public service. In point 2, we'll go through the types of conflict of interest. So a real conflict of interest, apparent conflict of interest, and potential conflict of interest. The objective is to distinguish them and therefore to better prevent them. In point 3, conflict of interest in the public service, will address the question of identifying and managing conflict of interest. And then in 3.2, we'll address some at-risk areas in the public services. Okay, I'll just take a look at the screen to see if everything is okay. So no comment in the chat. I assume everything is fine. Okay, let me continue. Great. A broader view of what defines conflict of interest. Let's start from corruption. Everyone knows about corruption. The Association of Certified Fraud Examiners defines it as the wrongful use of influence to procure a benefit for the actors or another person, contrary to their duty or the rights of others. So really corruption, we can simplify it as the abuse of entrusted power for private or personal or professional gain. So that's how I see corruption. And we surely know that there's a lot of costs to corruption. We can think at first about the political cost of corruption ensuring that we have a good and reliable political system in place. There is also social costs to corruption. We can just think about the goal of ensuring good governance in the public service and the trust of the public in the actions and the service that the government is offering. As well, there's economic costs when we think, yes, at the money which is lost, but also at the opportunity to grow and develop, which is lost, which is also a big cost of corruption. But when we think about corruption, we often think about the same types of corruption. So at first, we'll think about bribery. Bribery, which is the more classic corruption act that we often think of. So it relates to the offering, the promising, the giving, accepting, receiving of anything of value that can influence any forms of action or decision. So we know bribery, we know it can take form in contractual contexts, also in regulatory contexts, in the commercial context. So this is one type of corruption we're familiar with. If we jump to the next one, illegal gratuities. I often talk about illegal gratuities as a thank you, because I see it as a thank you for something that has been done in the past after a beneficial action was made. So illegal gratuities is really anything of value which is given to another individual or another party to be able to reward a business action or a business decision, let's say. The third one, economic extortion. Economic extortion, I see it as the other side of bribery, because it often involves threats, economic extortion, because there's often the use of force, the use of intimidation or fear to demand anything, often money or other considerations to be able to impact a decision in the future. So that is the a third type of corruption. And finally, we jump to the subject of interest, conflicts of interest. It seems to me intuitively that conflict of interest is not as easily definable as the others, because conflict of interest, as I said already, is so contextual. So that's why today together we'll really try to define and sort out conflict of interest to better understand in what context can we identify risk of conflict of interest? What is the link with corruption to be made? How can we see corruption in conflicts of interest cases? And how do we deal with conflicting interests in some contexts? Okay, let's start with the more theoretical definition, but which is really important. A public service employee is in a conflict of interest if a public service employee is in a relationship with the government, requiring PSE to exercise judgment on behalf of the public service, and PSE has a special interest tending to interfere with the proper exercise of judgment in that relationship. So we have a lot of things in that definition. So we have something which is really important, which is related to the question of the relationship. So the relationship with between the employee and the government is really important in understanding conflict of interest. We'll see why. There's also another point that I try to highlight, which is the exercise of judgment. So we'll have to try to define together, when does a public service employee has to exercise judgment if it's in those specific contexts that there might be a situation of conflict of interest? And finally, another keyword that I highlighted in that definition is the special interests. So surely those special interests, we'll need to address those and try to define them, try to see what form can they take and How can they be conflictual with the duties of a public service employee? Okay, so the words that I highlighted in that definition. First off, the question of the relationship. Why do we need to focus on the relationship between the public service employee and the government? It's because the PSE has a fiduciary relationship with the government. So the government is trusting the PSE to hold office on its behalf. So surely this is a question of, this is a relation of trust and responsibility towards the public that a public service employee has, and also towards the citizen. So that's why it's so important. So the public service employee has a moral duty to serve the government and also to serve its best interest. I also put the emphasis on the question of the judgment. One could say, why would we talk about judgment? A public service employee always need to exercise judgment in the course of their duties. This is partly true, in my opinion. If we look at the judgment as required when a decision is no longer routine. So this is an important point, because sometimes a public service employee can address the situation just by applying a specific guideline or a specific norm and standard. But when the judgment is required, this is different, because this is when a specific norm and standard does not apply anymore. And for example, an ethic officer has to exercise his judgment to be able to address a specific situation. So we define it here as it brings knowledge, skills, and insight to bear in unpredictable ways. So that's why judgment is so important in understanding that definition. And finally, another keyword that we highlighted together in the definition we just looked at is the question of interest. So what is this special interest we're talking about? And what form can this interest take? So we'll have to try and define this together. Okay, what are the interests involved? When we think about those interests, for sure those interests needs to be defined, because they're always specific to the context of the individuals involved in a situation. So the more classic interests we think of when we think about conflicts of interest is personal matters. So we often think about the relationships, we often think about the family, the friends, or any form of other personal benefit that one could have in a specific situation. For example, when we have a public service employees pushing the candidacy of a friend or a cousin, let's say. We also have other categories which are often overlooked or forgotten. So we have the financial interest as well. So those are more related to the corporate gifts. We often think about the corporate gifts, about the gratuities as well. But there's a lot of things we forget in that category. We can think about the invitation to events from companies with luxury holdings and things. So we'll be able to discuss this in the following slides as well. We also have the political interest, so which is related to many things. Maybe I can give an example. So we can think of, let's say, accepting consultancy with a firm who could have a strong interest in the department you're working for. So this could be a political interest to prevent or to look at to see if there's risk of conflict of interest. We also have a more professional interest that we need to look at. So let's say we can think about someone influencing the negotiation of contracts of a company that you have interest in joining the board member. So in such a context, you have to look at some of the risks of conflict of interest to be able to prevent them or manage them if you're already in an actual situation of conflict of interest. So we see that there's a lot of interest to be prevented, but together, more towards the end of the presentation, as I mentioned, we'll address a specific tool that we developed with Dow to be able to look at those interests more clearly and try to have a gradation of those interests and try to see what are the consequences to be prevented with those events. So this tool will be really useful and we'll look at it together. So conflict of interest in practice. We looked at the more theoretical definition that was in two points, but simply put, what is a conflict of interest? So a conflict of interest is an action or an involvement that compromises or appears or has the potential to compromise the judgment of a public service employee in the course of their duties. So we see already that we distinguish compromises or appears or has the potential to compromise the judgment of an employee. This distinction is made because there are three types of conflict of interest. And you'll see the link that I made when we run through those three types of conflict of interest. Another thing that I want to address, with that simple definition, we can clearly see that nowadays a conflict of interest surely goes beyond the common idea of accepting a gift to influence the judgment of an individual. So it can be related to many work context situation, to many form of involvements that one needs to look at in their workplace. So yes, we can also maybe define it simply as an incompatibility between different interests that an employee has. That's a simple way to define it as well. Another small thing that I want to address is that's often forgotten, is that recognizing a conflict of interest is not immediately a problem. That's an important aspect to think of, because the important issue with preventing and managing conflict of interest is really how it is dealt with. And nowadays, with corruption matters making news, conflict of interest is still taboo. So surely we as a public service employee, as an ethic officer, we need to normalize discussing the risks of conflict of interest, because the important issue is really how we deal with those risks of conflict of interest. So that's an important point in my opinion as well. Okay, to better address conflict of interest, we surely need to understand the three types of conflict of interest, which are the three really important, but are really different as well, and are prevented in different ways as well. So we'll look at them together with some short examples. Please don't focus on the applicability of those examples to your specific work context, because I know that sometimes it might not work exactly as it is shown in the examples, but try to focus on identifying the risk of conflict of interest and seeing how it can be managed and how it can be dealt with. Okay, perfect. So let's look at an example of conflict of interest. Tom participates in the activities of a job evaluation. So it is what is required to fill a position, despite one of the candidates' fate being his cousin. Tom says he has no interest in Faith having this position and think he can be involved in this process as he has been for several years. He says there is no concern because he is not involved in the selection process. He's involved in the job evaluation, which is way before just defining what is required to fill that position. So are we facing a risk of conflict of interest? We feel like intuitively that because the repercussions or the consequences are far from the job evaluation, because the selection process is really far and really apart from the job evaluation, that because the consequences are more late repercussions, they might be less important. But those repercussions are also to look at, and they're also to prevent. So that's why in this case, we're facing a real conflict of interest. I prefer the title actual conflict of interest, because I feel like every type of conflict of interest are real, they are existing, and they are to be prevented. So we can talk about actual conflict of interest. Such an interest is sufficient to influence the judgment of Tom and his impartiality in choosing the selection criteria that relates to the real organizational needs. So, for example, it doesn't mean that Tom has those intentions, but Tom could orient the choice of the criteria of the job evaluation based on Faith's skills and qualification. That's why in this case, it is an actual situation with competing personal and professional interests. So as we looked at the interests before, we see how some personal and professional interests can be conflicting in some manners. So this is a really simple case scenario, but I wanted to look at an actual conflict of interest, which is more easy to see, and in which we can really see how some interests are incompatible. So in this case scenario, Tom can surely have an impact on choosing those criteria to favor Faith. I wish I could have your feedbacks looking at those examples. I hope at the end, if you have questions, I'd be happy to answer those. Hopefully we'll have time to do so. So simply put, a real conflict of interest is an actual situation that involves competing interests. So it is a conflict of interest that exists at the present moment, which can have an impact on the judgment of an individual. So for more specifically for a public service employee, a COI is when a public service employee's interest is sufficient to influence their actions or their decisions in the performance of their duties. So we define the real conflict of interest. Now on, what is an apparent conflict of interest? This is one we often forget of. Let's look at a specific example. Alice is responsible of the call for tender process for the IT equipment of her department. The service provider with the highest score is Zub, a company that is known publicly because of situation that made headlines. The director who held Alice's position 6 months ago had a love affair with the CEO of Zub. Alice decides to select the company Zub anyway because, objectively thinking, it is the company that best meets the criteria established by the need assessment during the bid specification. So in that context, are we facing a situation of conflict of interest? For sure, we are not facing an actual situation of conflict of interest because we think about a position that was held in the past by another director. But still, what needs to be looked at and think of in that context? A question that is really interesting to ask ourselves while facing a risk of apparent conflict of interest is, would a reasonable person conclude that the public interest is compromised in such a situation? So when you put yourself in the situation, in the posture of the public, and you think at, does a well-informed person would see this situation as problematic? That's where you can have a more clearer point of view and just try to see if this situation could be seen as a conflict of interest from the eye of the public. And that's where we'll see in the next slide that an apparent conflict of interest is about the perception, is about what the public could see in that situation. And we know that in the context of the public service, this is really important because of the question of social acceptability and the question of how the public sees the services offered by the government, but as being done and being offered with integrity. So that's why it's so important. So in that specific case scenario that we looked at, we could say that the relational context of the former director raises the suspicion of non-compliance with procurement procedures, improper professional relationship, and favoritism with Zomp company, because in the eye of the public, they might not know that in the last 6 months, the director has changed. So keeping that in mind, that's why we can define this situation as an apparent conflict of interest. So yes, an apparent conflict of interest is one that another agent perceives or could perceive in you. Are apparent conflict of interest less important than actual ones? For sure they are not, especially in the public service. As I said, they are really important to prevent whether or not it is in fact the case that they exist, because as we discussed, of the appearance of public service integrity and because of social acceptability issues. Okay, so we defined together actual conflict of interest, real conflict of interest, and apparent conflict of interest. Now, the last types of conflict of interest we need to look at together are the potential conflicts of interest. Kate, yes, we'll look at an example together as we did with the others and try to define it simply. Kate works in the agriculture department, and her husband, John, also works in the public service and the health department. The two departments have started to discuss a joint project on farm animal disease. Kate and John are gradually taking responsibilities in starting the discussion around the negotiation of the terms of this departmental collaboration. Both find it enjoyable to work together on this and try to be as objective as possible in their decision-making process. So this is the example we look at. So for the moment, before we look at what's written here, for sure, both of them don't have formal responsibilities for the moment. But to what could lead that initial negotiation? What could be the repercussions and the consequences of those first responsibilities that are given to them? So we could say that such a situation is likely to lead to a more clear role in this negotiation, and that could be problematic and lead to an actual situation of conflict of interest. So that's why we need to prevent such a situation. So yes, various forms of project-related decision in that context are at risk of being interpreted as being made to further Kate and John's interests. So yes, it may never become an actual situation of conflict of interest, but the relational interests at stake are important, and the situation could be prevented. And also, the consequences for the institution, for the government, are really important. So for sure, such a potential conflict of interest could be prevented. And in some cases, it is the responsibility of a public service employee and um, public service employees with ethical related functions to be able to understand those case scenario to better address them and identify them in the workplace as well. So for a clear and simple definition of the last type of conflict of interest, the potential conflict of interest, it is a situation that could place you in a conflict of interest in the future. So that's why public service employees must act and make decisions that prevent situations that could allow conflict of interest in the future. And as I often said, we often think of conflict of interest as actual conflict of interest, which is the only form of conflict of interest to manage and prevent. But actual situation of conflict of interest need to be managed because they are happening in the present moment. But the thing with potential conflict of interest and apparent conflict of interest is that they can be prevented. So that's why we really need to address those situations in the public service. Okay, we saw together the three types of conflict of interest. Now that we understand maybe better those types of conflict of interest, I wanted to look at the tool that I talked to you at the beginning of this presentation. So this tool is included in the guide, and we want to refine it. We want to make sure it's easily understandable and also presented in a really concise manner to be able to present such a tool to public service employees in the workplace. So at first, you might find that this tool is simple. And yes, especially the first step, there's 3 steps in that tool. The first step is more simple because it's just about describing the situation. But you'll see how organizing, how we present the information and organizing our thought process in addressing a situation to see if there's risks of conflict of interest really helps a public service employees to go beyond his own position and his own subjective position to try to see more objectively the repercussions and the impact of such a situation. So, okay, if we run through that tool quickly together, the first step is the description of the situation. So just trying to think of who's involved, who are the actors. We can think about individuals, groups, organizations, any form of agent involved. We can also list the values that are concerned. So yes, we often think of the organizational values, which are really important to consider, but also to look at the moral basis of the issue and try to see maybe on a more personal standpoint, how do you stand facing such a situation as well? And thirdly, norms and standard as well, which are really important at the beginning of this thought process. Why? Because we saw and discussed at the beginning of this presentation that often when a specific guideline or a specific norm and standard applies, sometimes you just need to make sure that you follow that standard and that guideline is respected. And in such a context, you might not need to try to develop a thought process in regard of a conflict of interest, because a simple application of a norm can sort it out. So that's why we need to address this concern at the beginning of the thought process and see which rules apply. So that's the first step of the tool, describing the situation. The second step is one of the most important, which is the situation analysis. So first you need to list the most important constituent. That's the enumeration part. So just try to see what is involved, what are the interests involved, what should I consider in facing such a situation. Then comes the gradation. So that's where you determine what should be prioritized and why. So you list the interest are listed already. So you need to see what are the competing interests. What should come before the other interests? Should my professional interests come before some specific political interests in that context? So making that gradation is really important. The last point is the repercussions, just looking at the consequences, the foreseen consequences, and trying to see what is will have an high impact, at what level, what decision would have a crucial impact. So that is really important to understand what is involved and what will be the impact of your decision in facing a risk of conflict of interest. And it is also an important aspect, the repercussion point, because it helps you to go out of your own position and try to see in a more objective and impartial manner what really has an impact on my organization and on myself as well, and on my team, on a more ethical point of view. Just when we think of ethics as a culture, what can have a bad impact on my team, which I could be preventing? And the final step of the tool is the decision making. So an interesting question to ask yourself is, does this situation influence the professional judgment of an individual, or create a context that could influence it in the future or might appear to influence it? So at the end of the thought process, just asking yourself the situation maybe is a good just return to the point of this whole process, just trying to see if the professional judgment of an employee will be affected. And the validation is also a good question to ask yourself. So are you able to defend this decision, and what are the justifications to defend it? So as I said in the last slide, doing so will help you to fall out of your own position and try to see in a more independent way if there is a risk of conflict of interest to prevent or manage. The question is also, is this decision consistent with the vision of my organization, and is it taken in accordance with its values, principles, and members? So that's this three-step tool, really simple three-step, but just I find it really interesting to use that tool because you can address a situation really quickly and try to see if you should be acting in a specific case scenario, or if you can just pursue with your activities, pursue with your decisions. So quick one-pager that we included in the guide as well, which is really important, which is included at the end of the guide. Okay, I'll try to look at the time with you quickly. It's been 45 minutes. I guess I have 10 minutes left to finish that presentation. Okay, yes, the third part that we wanted to address, at-risk areas in the public service. So as we looked at the beginning of this presentation, we looked at the table of content of the guide. You saw a lot of sections where we present some risk of conflict of interest. So in those sections, we present who's concerned by this risk. We give a little bit of context to know in what situation, work context this could happen. We present the risk of conflict of interest, we define it, and then we give an example of conflict of interest. So for each section of the guide, we keep it really concise and address those issues, just to give an idea to the person consulting it, to the ethic officer referring to it, to understand a situation he's involved in, just to give some general context and precise what is the risk of conflict of interest. But in those sections of the section 11 of the guide, we really wanted to put the emphasis as well on some important sectors of activity in which the data and the statistics show that there is conflicts of interest to be prevented because they are at-risk areas. So the first one is the human resources. In the human resources, there's some risk to be prevented, especially in the candidate selection. We saw initially that this is a more classic way of presenting the conflict of interest. For example, talking about a family member or a friend which is promoted or which is given an opportunity to access a position. But this is a real situation of conflict of interest that needs to be prevented and addressed because it's happening a lot in the public services across the world. Another risk of conflict of interest to be looked at in the human resources is the termination of services. So when an employee is finishing his position and is closing his position, for example, or leaving his function in the public service, she still has a relationships with the government and relationships that we need to look at because in a lot of contexts, the public service help some old public service employee to have great relationships with outside organizations or outside industries, and they will be involved quickly in a lot of the activities of those outside organizations. So this is a risk of conflict of interest to be prevented and to be looked at in the public service as well. The third one is the other remunerative work, which is also really important because we know, especially with the high-level positions in the public service, that some of the employees have outside responsibilities. So they might be involved in a lot of activities, especially board members. So surely the ethic officers or any public service employees involved in treating ethical matters must look at the compatibility of those interests and ensure that there's no conflicting interest that could affect the integrity of the government and of the services offered as well. So those are the three main at-risk areas in the human resources. When you look at the guide, you'll see that we listed a lot more and we address a lot of sections. This is an important section of the guide. But I wanted to put the emphasis on those three as we see statistically, as I said, a lot more risks to be prevented in those sectors of activity. The second at-risk area in the public service surely is the contract sector, so the procurement sector. So when we think about the call for tender, either related to the solicitation method, the bid evaluation, we can also think about the post-contract evaluation because something we often see in the public services is the objective of a contract being clearly defined, but a poor or no post-contract evaluation being rendered, and that is really problematic because there is a lot of risk of corruption at large in that context, but also a lot of risk of conflict of interest to be looked at and prevented. So I'm trying to go quickly. I'm sorry, I see the clock. I see the time advancing. So maybe I want to leave you with my last slide because it helps to have a broader view, a more managerial view of how conflict of interest can be prevented and managed in an organization. Yes, so we're changing the scope now. We were more in the knowledge and skills to be developed to better understand conflict of interest. But to close with you, I found it important to have a broader perspective of how a conflict of interest could be better managed in the workplace. So the first point is to ensure that public service employees know what is required of them in terms of declaration. So that is really important because this will ensure that you have the declarations that you need to pursue your work and make the analysis that you should be doing. The second point is the monitoring and review of conflict of interest declaration. So there is no point in requesting those declarations from the public service employees if they are not reviewed and monitored in any way. So surely this work needs to be done with a lot of attention, and this is an important point where all the analysis and looking at the interest of the competing interests of the employees, and also looking at the at-risk areas of your department or of your work team is really important. Yes, this makes me jump to the third point, which is reviewing the at-risk areas for potential conflict of interest of your department or work team. This will help you to better understand what are your employee facing and what should be prevented in your department. But this will also help you to adapt procedures if needed and see if some campaigns should be done, if some specific communication products should be developed in your workplace to better inform your employees. So this is an important point as well, because the risks we looked at in the last slide are not applicable to all departments. For sure, they are the main risk that we can identify in the public service. But as a department, you surely have specific risks that should be identified and addressed. The fourth point is to equip employees. This is an important one. So promoting policies, promoting the guide, knowing that the guide will be implemented, that will be really interesting to make sure that the guide is promoted, because we want to make it accessible online, so it will be easily accessible and people will be able to have concrete and practical examples of conflict of interest to be able to reflect on their own situation. We also talk about providing assistance and training. So at your turn as an ethic officer, maybe some trainings can be done to assist the public service employees of your department. And finally, one point which is really crucial, it's the development of an organizational culture where conflict of interest matters can be discussed. So as we said about at the beginning of this discussion, conflict of interest nowadays is still taboo. So for sure, we need to make it acceptable and to discuss those issues and just try to identify together if there is some risk of conflict of interest to be prevented, and not see it as a red alarm or as a situation that could put you in a dangerous situation, but to see it as on an ethical perspective, as an important approach to treating any forms of ethics and integrity matters. So that's why this prevention approach is really important as well. Okay, lastly, maybe returning to the guide, I wanted to present you more precisely. I wanted to jump in the knowledge and the definitions of conflict of interest with you, because as I said, we put the emphasis on that in the guide because we feel like having generic norms and standard is really important to be able to frame the practice. But when we think about the guide on a practical level, we really want to be able to be easily, we really want the employee to be able to use it easily and refer to it casually on a day-to-day basis and see if they are in a situation of conflict of interest that should be prevented or should be managed. So that was our approach in developing the guide. And I hopefully think it will be useful for the ethics officer, but as well for the public service employees at large, just to better understand them and have clear reference and clear situations that we can look to and to understand our own situation we're facing. So thank you for your time. I hope this presentation was clear, and hopefully we'll have some time for some questions. I'd be happy to discuss some scenarios or any forms of question in the future. You can contact me for those. Maybe I would close by saying that we have a really small surveys, I think of 6 or 7 questions that we'd like you to fill, please. The link will be sent by my colleagues. So if you may fill quickly that small survey of a couple questions, that would be really appreciated. Thank you, colleagues.
Thank you very much, Charles. Can we give Charles Batupili clap, colleagues? Charles, thank you so much for such an informative presentation. We are going to unpack the presentation tomorrow in our working groups. We are going to work on these examples and come up with recommendations and additions that we can include. Now I have negotiated with the next presenter on the feedback on the National Ethics Officer Advisory Committee. So this item also will take it tomorrow. So I'm going to urge the colleagues that let's be on time tomorrow, because I've negotiated that we take this item for tomorrow together with the closing remarks. So we'll do both of them tomorrow. So please, let's be on time tomorrow. I want to take this opportunity . So colleagues, Bramos was also indicating that there's a survey that we are going to circulate to you. We'll send you the link. So please also let's complete that survey tomorrow, because Charles was requesting that we complete that survey now. I can see in your eyes that you are not present now. You are already on other responsibilities because we need to balance. Ne? And let me take this opportunity, colleagues, to thank you for being such a wonderful audience who is participating. And I believe that the contribution that you are making will even be bigger than the one that you had already made with this kind of empowerment. Give yourself a Batupili clap. With the powers vested in me, I declare the session closed. I'll see you tomorrow at 8:30, colleagues. Thank you.